You think a waitress can prove my $6 billion model wrong?
I already did. Your data was hiding the bias.
The first thing Amara Cole noticed was not the applause. It was the number in the lower corner of the screen, 92%. Damon Whitaker said it as if the figure had been carved into stone. The room believed him because men like Damon rarely had to repeat themselves. Northbridge Hall glowed beneath chandeliers of falling glass. Bankers leaned forward. Reporters typed. Executives smiled when they expected to be seen smiling. Amara moved quietly between them with a tray of sparkling water balanced against one palm. She had spent years learning how to cross expensive rooms without interrupting the people who assumed the room belonged to them. On stage, Damon stood beside a wall-sized projection labeled Meriden, Investing in America, Most Probe Communities. He was 52, silver at the temples, calm in the way powerful men could afford to be. Meridian removes emotion from investment, he told the audience. It sees opportunity where human judgment sees uncertainty. The next slide flashed up for less than 10 seconds. Rows of projected returns, default estimates, geographic risk bands. Amara's eyes caught two values that should not have lived on the same page. A group of small businesses showed returns strong enough to clear the fund's minimum threshold, yet their projected failure rate had nearly doubled after regional adjustment. She slowed. The glasses on her tray gave a faint chime. The slide changed. The contradiction remained. It was not proof yet. It was a loose thread. She set down 2 drinks and used the back of an order slip. One quick calculation, then another. The adjustment appeared to mix recovery period data with figures gathered during a downturn, without correcting for the shift. That could distort risk. But there was something else. The businesses receiving the sharpest penalty were clustered in neighborhoods like the one where she had grown up. Amara looked toward Olivia Grant, the analyst near the control station. Olivia watched with the fixed expression of someone hiding concern. Amara approached and held out the slip. "You may want to check the normalization on the regional set," she said softly. Olivia looked down. Recognition crossed her face, followed by fear. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "From the slide." Before Olivia could respond, Damon's voice cut across the hall. "Is there a problem?" The room turned with him. Olivia straightened. Amara felt every face arrive at once. Damon stepped away from the stage, still smiling, though the smile had narrowed. "I asked whether there was a problem." Amara could have apologized. She could have returned to the service corridor, finished the night, collected her check, and kept her life intact. Instead, she met his eyes. "I think the regional adjustment may be producing a distorted result." Damon studied her black service jacket, the tray in her hand, the badge above her name. "And which part of our analytics team are you with?" "I'm not with the analytics team." "Then who are you with?" "The hotel." The first laugh came from a table near the front. It was quiet, almost polite. Others followed because laughter was easier than uncertainty. Damon waited for it to settle. "You're a server." "Yes." "And you believe you found a flaw in a model built by economists, engineers, and risk specialists." His tone remained controlled, which made the contempt sharper. Amara felt heat rise beneath her collar, but her voice stayed even. "I believe 2 values on your slide do not agree." Damon turned toward the audience, inviting them into the joke. "Seeing numbers is not the same as understanding them." "That's true," Amara said, "which is why they should be checked." The laughter stopped. Damon's smile faded. "Return to your work." Amara lowered her eyes, not in surrender but because she had said what mattered. She turned away. Behind her, Olivia remained at the console. Her fingers moved over the keyboard. Damon noticed. Olivia froze. "What exactly are you checking?" For several seconds, she said nothing. Then the original data appeared on her monitor. Her face lost its color. She looked toward Amara, then back at Damon. "Sir," she said carefully, "the values she identified do not match the source file." 12 hours earlier, Amara had been standing barefoot in a narrow kitchen on the south side, waiting for an old coffee maker to finish making a sound like it was reconsidering its purpose in life. The apartment was quiet, except for the radiator clicking behind the wall and the distant groan of an early bus turning onto Cottage Grove Avenue. On the table sat a second-hand laptop, 2 library books on statistical modeling, a yellow legal pad filled with equations, and a nursing school tuition statement folded beneath a ceramic mug. Maya Cole entered wearing navy scrubs and carrying her shoes in one hand. At 23, she had their mother's serious eyes, and Amara's habit of pretending exhaustion was temporary. "You're still working on that data set?" Maya asked. Amara closed the spreadsheet before the laptop could freeze. "I was checking something. At 5 in the morning, the numbers are less argumentative before sunrise." Maya smiled, but the expression did not last. She picked up the tuition statement and placed it back down carefully. "The payment deadline is Friday." "I know. You don't have to cover all of it." "I know that too." They had repeated versions of this conversation for years. Maya would offer to pause school, work more hours, or find a cheaper program. Amara would listen, nod, and quietly make certain none of those things happened. 10 years earlier, when their mother's illness turned every week into a new calculation, Amara had been the one with the clearer option. She was 19, nearly halfway through an applied mathematics program at Harold Washington College, carrying grades high enough to transfer to a university. Maya had only just begun planning her own future. Their mother needed appointments, medication, and someone home when the treatments left her too weak to stand for long. Amara withdrew for what she told herself would be 1 semester. 1 semester became 2 years. By the time their mother died, tuition had increased, the savings were gone, and Amara had become the person who kept everything moving. She never described it as sacrifice. Sacrifice sounded temporary. This had become a life. Still, mathematics remained. It waited for her after late shifts and before early ones. She learned from free university lectures, used textbooks with other students' notes in the margins, and public datasets downloaded from city websites. She became particularly interested in the way institutions use statistics to defend choices they had already made. "You should apply again," Maya said. "To school." Amara poured coffee into 2 mismatched cups. "School requires money and time. I'm currently short on both. You have the ability." "Ability has never been the only price of admission." Maya looked at her with frustration sharpened by affection. "You say that like it's a law." "No," Amara replied, "laws can be changed." Before leaving, Maya paused beside the legal pad. On the top page, Amara had written a sentence beneath a series of probability estimates. "A model does not create history, but it can preserve history's decisions." "What does that mean?" Maya asked. Amara considered the simplest answer. "A computer learns from what people did before. If those choices were unfair, the computer can repeat them faster and call the result objective." By 8:30, Amara was entering the Calder house through the employee entrance beneath a delivery awning glazed with old rain. The hotel presented a different face from the front. Polished limestone, brass doors, and attendants who remembered the names of important guests. In the service corridor, the walls were beige, the lighting was hard, and everyone moved quickly enough to avoid conversation. Evan Rourke stood beside the assignment board in a charcoal suit, rearranging staff names with a silver pen. Amara found hers beneath Auxiliary Service, West Corridor. "I was assigned to Northbridge Hall," she said. Evan did not look up. "There were adjustments. I've worked more corporate events than half the people in the main room. This client has particular expectations. About service?" He finally met her eyes. Evan rarely said anything openly offensive. He preferred sentences that arrived with their meaning concealed. "About presentation," he said. Amara glanced at the board. 3 less experienced white employees had been moved into the main hall. 2 black employees had been sent to side stations. "What kind of presentation?" A small strain appeared beside Evan's mouth. "Do not make this difficult." The words were quiet, almost weary, as though her noticing had created the problem. Amara held his gaze for a moment, then tied on her apron. She needed the shift, she needed the hours. She needed Maya to remain in school. At 11:15, one of the main room servers called in sick, and Evan's carefully arranged image developed a hole. He found Amara polishing glasses near the service elevator. "You're moving to Northbridge," he said. "They start seating at noon. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just necessity wearing authority's voice." Amara followed him upstairs. As she entered the hall, Technicians were testing a vast presentation screen. A blue and gold title appeared across it. Meridian, Investing in America. Amara stopped for half a second. Beneath the slogan, a map of Chicago glowed in different shades of risk. The darkest sections covered neighborhoods she knew by bus routes, grocery stores, and the faces of people who had learned not to expect banks to return their calls. Evan noticed her looking. "Your job is the room," he said, "not the screen." Amara picked up her tray. She did not yet know that before the evening ended, the screen would become the only thing in the room no one could stop her from seeing. Olivia's confirmation did not produce an argument at first. It produced a pause. Damon remained near the front of Northbridge Hall, one hand resting against the edge of a table as though the room had shifted slightly, and he intended to steady it without letting anyone notice. On the monitor beside Olivia, two columns of figures sat exposed beneath the pale light of the screen. Amara could see them from several yards away. The original return rate, the adjusted failure estimate. The mismatch was no longer a private observation written on an order slip. It had become visible, and visible things were harder to dismiss. Damon walked toward the console. "Is this a data entry issue?" he asked. Olivia's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "I don't think so." "You don't think?" The question was gentle, but Olivia's shoulders tightened. She enlarged the source table. The regional adjustment is applying recovery period performance against a downturn baseline. The comparison isn't normalized. Damon glanced at Amara. "Which is exactly what she said?" Olivia hesitated. "Yes." A murmur moved through the audience. Damon turned before it could become a conversation. "Then we have found a labeling inconsistency," he said. "Nothing more. Amara should have left it there." She had warned them. The analyst had confirmed the mismatch. But Damon gestured for the presentation to continue, and the next sequence of slides made the problem larger. Meridian was not merely forecasting private equity returns. Whitaker Strategic planned to use it to guide nearly $6 billion in lending, redevelopment funds, and small business investment across several American cities. Damon described the model as a safeguard against bias. "Human judgment carries assumptions," he said. "Meridian does not care about appearance, background, or neighborhood reputation. It evaluates performance." The statement drew approving nods. Amara watched the map behind him. Neighborhoods were divided into green, yellow, and red zones. Many of the red zones followed boundaries that had existed long before Meridian, boundaries shaped by property values, credit access, and decades of uneven investment. The model did not include race as a variable. It did not need to. Zip code could perform much of the same work without using the word. Damon brought up a comparison between two restaurant supply companies seeking expansion financing. Their revenues were similar. Their debt histories were nearly identical. Their cash reserves differed by less than 2%. Meridian approved one and classified the other as high risk. Amara felt the answer before she located it. The approved company was based in Lincoln Park. The rejected company operated in Bronzeville. "Excuse me," she said. Evan appeared from the edge of the room with alarm already forming on his face. Damon looked toward her slowly. "We have addressed your concern, not this one." She set down her tray. "Those companies have nearly the same operating profile." "Nearly is not the same." "No. But the difference in their risk score is too large to come from their financials." Damon's expression cooled. "You have now seen several slides and decided you understand a system developed over 18 months. I'm asking which variable created the difference." "Variables," he said, "are not interpreted one at a time." "Then show the grouped contribution." A few people shifted in their seats. The exchange no longer sounded like a billionaire correcting a server. It sounded like one analyst challenging another, and Damon seemed to hear that change before anyone else. "Do you have a degree in statistics, Ms. Cole?" "I studied applied mathematics." "Studied? I did not complete the program." Damon turned toward the audience. "So we are delaying a $6 billion investment presentation to receive a model review from someone who did not finish college." This time, the laughter was thinner. Several people glanced at the screen instead of Amara. She felt the familiar pressure to explain her life in order to earn the right to speak. Her mother's illness, the hospital bills, Maya, the years of work, she gave him none of it. My transcript does not change the two companies on that slide, she said. Damon's jaw shifted almost imperceptibly. The model includes hundreds of indicators. Then one of them is overpowering the others. Based on what evidence? Same revenue trend, similar payment history, similar cash flow, similar debt, different zip code. Damon's eyes sharpened. Are you suggesting the model discriminates? I'm saying it may be using geography as a substitute for conditions it has not measured directly. That is not the same thing. It can produce the same result. The room went still. Amara continued before he could interrupt. A neighborhood with lower property values may have lower property values because it received less investment. If the model treats that history as proof that future investment is unsafe, it turns past exclusion into a prediction. Jonathan Reed, a regional bank executive seated near the center aisle, raised his hand. Can we isolate the location contribution? Damon ignored him. Jonathan asked again, louder. Olivia looked to Damon for permission. He gave a slight nod, the movement of a man choosing the least damaging option. She opened the diagnostic panel. The screen displayed the risk contributions for both companies. Revenue strength differed by less than 1 point. Debt service differed by 2. Management history was nearly equal. The geographic adjustment created a 21-point gap. No one laughed. Jonathan leaned back, his face tightening. That is not a minor variance. Damon looked toward Olivia. Explain it. The model uses local property trends, historical lending volume, and business closure rates, she said. Those factors are bundled into the geographic score. Amara studied the lower table. Does it include businesses that were denied financing? Olivia looked at her. No. Only funded applicants with completed performance records. Then it learns only from the businesses the system previously chose to support. The implication settled over the room with more force than an accusation. Communities that had received fewer loans produced fewer examples of funded success. Fewer examples of funded success made them appear less promising. The model then used that absence as a reason to deny further investment. Damon had called it neutral. Amara saw a closed circle wearing the appearance of mathematics. Meridian is not measuring potential, she said. It is measuring who was given a chance before. Damon's confidence did not disappear. It hardened. You are drawing social conclusions from a technical tool you have not examined. Then let me examine it. For the first time that afternoon, Damon did not have an immediate answer. The screen behind him remained divided between two nearly identical companies and two radically different judgments. He had built the event around the idea that Meridian could see what people missed. Instead, a woman his event had nearly kept out of the room had seen what Meridian was designed not to question. Damon had built his reputation on turning hesitation into weakness. Amara could almost see the decision take shape behind his eyes. He could acknowledge the concern and surrender control of the room, or he could enlarge the confrontation until everyone forgot how it began. Men like Damon often preferred a larger risk to a smaller humiliation. He stepped back onto the stage and adjusted his jacket. Ms. Cole believes she has identified a structural flaw in Meridian, he said. His voice carried easily now, restored by the microphone. That is a serious claim. I said the model should be checked, Amara replied. You said it converts past exclusion into future denial, because that is what the current output suggests. Damon nodded as though she had entered a trap. Our team spent 18 months developing this system. It was reviewed by economists, engineers, and outside consultants. You have observed selected slides during a catered presentation. The word catered landed precisely where he intended. Not as profanity, not as an explicit insult, as a reminder to the room of where she stood. You are asking these investors to trust your interpretation over theirs. No, Amara said. I'm asking them to trust evidence over presentation. A few guests lowered their eyes to hide reactions. Damon's fingers closed around the microphone. Then perhaps we should test your evidence. He turned toward Olivia. Prepare the technical summary and the demonstration dataset. Olivia stared at him. The full summary? The investor version. Caleb Ross, the chief financial officer, leaned toward Damon and spoke quietly. Amara could not hear the words, but she saw Caleb's concern and Damon's refusal. "Here is my proposal," Damon announced. "Miss Cole will be given access to a limited anonymized dataset and the same technical materials provided to our institutional reviewers. If she can identify a material error that changes an investment classification, Whitaker Strategic will pay her $4 million. The number struck the room like a dropped tray. Phones appeared almost immediately. Reporters stopped typing and began recording. Evan moved toward Amara. "This is over," he whispered. "Return to the service area. He made the offer to me. You are an employee of this hotel, and I am standing in this room." Evan's face tightened. Do not confuse attention with authority. Damon watched their exchange with faint satisfaction. He expected management to remove the inconvenience for him. Amara looked toward the screen, then at Olivia, who seemed torn between warning her and asking her not to continue. $4 million was not a prize. It was a weapon Damon believed was too heavy for her to lift. "What happens if I find nothing?" Amara asked. "You acknowledge publicly that your accusation was unsupported." "I did not accuse anyone of misconduct. You accused our model of unfairly excluding communities. I question the assumptions producing the output, then defend the question." Marcus Bell, an attorney seated near the rear, stood before Amara could answer. "The conditions need to be recorded." Damon frowned. "This is a public demonstration, not a contract negotiation. You attached a payment to a measurable result," Marcus said. "That makes the terms relevant." A ripple of restrained amusement moved through the room. Damon's challenge had been intended as theater. Marcus had introduced paperwork, the natural enemy of theatrical promises. Amara considered the offer. She knew enough about corporate models to understand how easily a test could be shaped around the desired result. "I have conditions," she said. Damon gave a short laugh. "Of course you do. The data must be the version shown to investors today. No one changes the files after the test begins. The version history stays visible. Dr. Helen Park supervises the process. Every correction must be reproducible. And the results remain on the screen." Attention shifted toward Helen Park, who sat near the front with a notebook closed in her lap. She had not defended Amara or Damon. Her expression suggested she trusted neither confidence nor outrage without evidence. "I will supervise," Helen said, "provided both sides accept the same standard." Damon looked displeased by the phrase "both sides." "Agreed." "One more condition," Amara said. "Half of the money goes to me." Half establish a scholarship fund for adults who had to leave school because of family or financial responsibilities. The room changed again. Until that moment, Damon could have presented Amara as ambitious, reckless, or drawn by money. Her request removed the easiest story he could tell about her. "You are negotiating a donation before proving anything," he said. "I am deciding what the risk is worth." Marcus approached the stage. Within minutes, his legal pad held a short written agreement: $2 million to Amara as an independent discovery and consulting fee, $2 million to a scholarship fund, payment triggered by a reproducible material error that altered investment classification. Damon read it once. Material must mean a change affecting more than isolated cases. Helen spoke from her seat. Then define it as a statistically meaningful pattern or a financial impact exceeding the model's stated tolerance. Damon accepted. He signed with a black pen and pushed the paper across the table. Amara signed beneath him. Evan watched as if each stroke of her name erased part of his control. Olivia prepared a disconnected laptop. 14 pages of technical documentation appeared on the main screen. The demonstration dataset contained anonymized records from hundreds of small businesses. 3 whiteboards were rolled into place. A digital clock was set for 65 minutes. Damon handed Amara a marker. "You wanted the model," he said. "Now you have it." Amara looked at the clock, then at the rows of faces waiting for her to fail. She removed her service jacket, folded it over the back of a chair, and stood before the first board. "I do not need to prove I am smarter than you," she said. "I only need to prove your model treats equal businesses differently." Helen pressed the timer. 65 minutes began disappearing. For the first 30 seconds, Amara did not touch the keyboard. Damon noticed. Several guests noticed. A reporter near the aisle whispered something into her phone. The clock fell from 65 to 64:30, while Amara stood before the first whiteboard reading the documentation index. Damon folded his arms. "The timer is running. I can see it. Then perhaps you should begin." Amara uncapped the marker. At the top of the board she wrote 4 questions. Where did the data come from? Waypeers in it? How is missing? How does Aaron change the decision? Helen looked at the board and leaned forward slightly. Damon gave a dismissive breath. "Those are policy questions." "They are model questions," Amara said. "A result cannot be stronger than the information used to produce it." She began with the source definitions. Meridian combined tax records, payment histories, property trends, business closures, lending records, employment data, and regional economic indicators. It appeared sophisticated because it contained many variables. Complexity often impressed people who did not ask whether the variables described reality accurately. Amara examined the definition of business failure. The model counted bankruptcy, dissolution, prolonged inactivity, and closure under a single outcome. She opened a sample of records and compared them with transaction notes. "You classified acquisitions as failures," she said. Olivia moved closer to the screen. "Some acquisitions closed the original registration, but the owners received positive payouts." Amara highlighted several records. These companies did not collapse. They were purchased. Damon responded from the stage. The original entity ceased operating. That is a legal status, not a financial loss. She recalculated the closure variable after separating unsuccessful closures from profitable sales and mergers. The failure rate for small firms dropped by nearly 6 points. A low murmur spread across the room. Damon glanced at the clock. 56 minutes remained. "That does not change classification," he said. "Not alone." Amara moved to the second section. The model assigned a penalty for delayed payments. On the surface, the variable made sense. Businesses that paid late could be under financial pressure, but the dates clustered around a period when a severe winter storm had shut down transit and commercial activity across several districts. Meridian treated those temporary disruptions as evidence of weak management. "Were disaster periods removed from the behavioral score?" she asked. Olivia looked at Caleb. Caleb looked at Damon. "The model includes regional controls," Olivia said carefully. "Controls are not exclusions." Amara filtered the records by location and date. Businesses in the most affected areas carried penalties long after their revenue had recovered. The model remembers the interruption but ignores the recovery. She adjusted the window and recalculated. Another group moved out of the high-risk category. 47 minutes remained. Damon's composure had not broken, but his stillness had changed. At the beginning, he had stood like someone observing a demonstration. Now he watched like someone guarding a door. Amara continued. The property stability variable gave higher scores to companies located in areas with rising real estate values. The logic assumed valuable property indicated a healthy commercial environment, but the model treated low property values as proof of business weakness even when company cash flow was strong. "You are rewarding businesses for operating near expensive buildings," she said. "Property value reflects market confidence," Damon replied. "It also reflects decades of investment decisions that the business itself did not control." "You are turning this into a social lecture." "No. I am showing you where the number came from." She selected 2 businesses with comparable revenue growth, payment history, reserves, and management experience. One operated in an affluent district. The other operated in a historically underfunded neighborhood. The location-based variables created most of the risk difference. Amara replaced property value with direct measures of rent burden, cash flow stability, and customer concentration. The lower-scored business moved into the approved range. Then another did. Then 20 more. The screen began filling with altered classifications. 38 minutes remained. Jonathan leaned toward Helen. "How many cases have changed?" Helen counted the output. 83 so far. Damon's answer came quickly. "Out of hundreds." "She is not finished," Helen said. Amara grouped the changes by geography. The pattern was unmistakable. The majority of businesses upgraded after correction came from neighborhoods with large black populations. Yet the revised portfolio did not produce dramatically greater projected losses. In some simulations, expected returns improved because the model had been overlooking profitable firms. This is not only excluding qualified applicants, Amara said. It is causing your fund to miss viable investments. That line affected the room differently. Fairness had concerned some people. Lost profit concerned nearly everyone. Several investors opened laptops. Damon saw them. She is altering variables without testing long-term performance, he said. She is optimizing for a conclusion. Amara turned from the board. Then explain why your original model counts profitable acquisitions as failure, temporary storm delays as poor management, and property values as business performance. Because risk is cumulative, so is bias. The words settled between them. Damon's expression hardened. You are focused on communities like your own. That is not objective analysis. Amara felt the insult beneath the sentence. He had not questioned the white analysts for studying wealthy districts. Their interest had been expertise. Hers was being reframed as emotion. You call it personal when I notice who is being removed, she said. You call it technical when the model removes them. No one laughed. 27 minutes remained. Amara returned to the documentation and reached page 12. The formatting changed. The variable names used a different convention. A column referenced in the methodology was absent from the dataset. She checked the document properties. The timestamp showed the page had been modified after Helen started the clock. Amara read it twice, wanting to be certain before she spoke. Then she looked toward Olivia. Why was page 12 edited after the test began? Olivia's face went still. Caleb lowered his eyes. For the first time, Damon looked not at Amara, but toward the control station. The room had entered a different kind of silence. Until then, Amara had been finding errors. Now she might have found evidence. For several seconds, no one answered her question. The timer continued counting down in the corner of the screen, indifferent to the silence gathering beneath it. 26 minutes and 40 seconds remained. Olivia stared at the document properties as though the timestamp might correct itself if she waited long enough. Caleb pressed 2 fingers against his mouth. Damon was the first to recover. A formatting update, he said. Someone probably corrected the presentation layout. Amara looked at page 12 again. Formatting does not remove a data column. Damon stepped closer to the stage monitor. You are working from an investor summary. Not every internal field appears in every version. Then, why does the methodology reference a field that is no longer there? She pointed to a note beneath the regional recovery calculation. The documentation still referred to a variable labeled recovery study, but the dataset contained no such column. Without it, businesses that had recovered after temporary disruption remained grouped with businesses still in decline. The model was not merely incomplete. It was being asked to reach a conclusion after the evidence needed to challenge that conclusion had been removed. Helen rose from her chair. The agreement requires visible version history. Damon's patience thinned. We are not turning this event into a forensic investigation. Marcus remained standing near the signed document. You agreed that no files would be changed after the test began. Evan moved toward Amara, his voice lowered for her alone. Step away from the computer. You have already gone far beyond your role. Amara looked at him. My role changed when Mr. Whitaker signed the agreement. You are still an employee of this hotel. Then the hotel should be concerned that one of its employees was given altered material during a public challenge. Evan's expression tightened. He glanced toward Damon before answering, and that glance said more than his words. You are embarrassing an important client. The timestamp is embarrassing him, Amara said. Olivia made a small sound, almost a breath, then opened the archived file directory. Damon turned sharply. Ms. Grant, what are you doing? Showing the version history. I did not authorize that. Helen stepped beside the console. I did. The archive contained 4 versions of the technical summary. The earliest included the missing recovery field. A later version adjusted several business classifications after a quality review. The file Amara had received combined the older methodology with a newer table from which the recovery column had been removed. Olivia opened the comparison panel. Red marks appeared across the screen. showing deleted records and revised labels. "This is not the file I prepared for review," she said. Her voice was quiet, but the microphone near the console carried it through the room. Damon's face remained composed. Only the muscle near his jaw moved. "Who prepared this version?" Olivia checked the approval history. It was exported through the executive administration account. Caleb lowered his gaze. Amara watched him, recognizing the posture of a man who had spent too long hoping silence would remain neutral. "Can you restore the original field?" she asked. Olivia nodded. "Yes, do it." Damon stepped between them. "The challenge concerns the model presented to investors, not unfinished drafts. That is exactly the problem," Amara replied. "The model presented to investors uses numbers that cannot be reproduced from the documentation presented with it." Olivia restored the column. Amara reran the classification. The result appeared within seconds. More than 100 records changed. Several businesses that had been labeled unstable showed sustained recovery and positive cash flow. Most were located in the same neighborhoods Meridian had ranked as poor investments. The room absorbed the pattern slowly. It was one thing to hear that a model contained bias. It was another to watch qualified businesses return to view when a deleted column was restored. Jonathan stood. Why were these records excluded? No one answered him. Amara opened the removed rows. Many represented firms that had survived temporary closures, reorganized debt, and returned to profitability. Without those examples, Meridian learned that recovery was rare in those districts. It then used that false lesson to reject the next group of applicants. The model was trained to forget every business that contradicted its assumptions, Amara said. Damon's voice sharpened. "You are implying intent without evidence. I am describing the effect. The effect may be accidental. Accidental harm is still harm when people are warned and choose not to check." The sentence landed on Caleb. His hands folded together, then separated. Damon looked at the timer. 19 minutes remained. "This demonstration has been compromised," he announced. "We will end it and conduct an internal review." "No," Amara said. He turned toward her. "Excuse me, you offered to stop when you believed I was failing. Now that the files have changed, you want to stop because the test is succeeding." A few guests nodded. Damon saw them. "You are free to leave with no consequence," he said. "I will instruct the hotel not to discipline you." The offer sounded generous until its meaning became clear. He was offering protection from punishment for exposing his own material. Amara placed the marker on the table. "I do not need protection from something I did not do." Helen reopened the audit log and projected the approval chain. The altered file had been generated after the timer began. The change request had come from an account assigned to Damon's executive office. Final approval carried the initials of his senior administrator. Helen looked directly at him. "Whether you personally edited the document is not the question," she said. "Your office changed the evidence after the challenge began." The clock continued running. Damon had spent the afternoon insisting that numbers were more reliable than people. Now the numbers were describing him. Damon did not deny the audit log. He attacked the only thing he believed the room might still doubt, Amara. "This is too convenient," he said. "A hotel employee identifies a technical issue, knows exactly where to look, and then discovers an internal version conflict within an hour." His gaze shifted to Olivia. "Unless someone prepared her." Olivia stepped back from the console. "I met her today. You spoke before the presentation." She handed me a calculation from the slide, and perhaps something else was exchanged. Amara felt the room change. Evidence had pushed Damon into a corner, but accusation offered him another exit. People who had accepted every polished claim he made now studied her with fresh uncertainty. They had watched her perform the work. Still, some found conspiracy easier to believe than competence. Damon continued, "Whitaker Strategic handles confidential financial information. Until we determine how Ms. Cole obtained knowledge of our model, no one leaves with the demonstration device." Two security employees near the doors looked toward Evan for direction. They did not touch Amara or block her physically, but their attention settled on her with unmistakable weight. "I obtain knowledge by reading what you displayed," she said. "You expect us to believe that?" You expected this room to believe 92% because it appeared behind your name. A quiet reaction moved through the guests. Damon ignored it. Turn over your phone. No. If you have nothing to hide, my phone is private property. You have not shown that I accessed anything unlawfully. Marcus stepped forward. Correct. Jamin looked at him with irritation. This is a security matter. Then handle it through a lawful process, not a public demand. Evan approached Amara. His face was pale with the effort of appearing calm. You are suspended effective immediately, he said. For what? Disrupting an event, refusing management instruction, and creating a risk for the hotel. I was participating in a challenge your client created. You were assigned to serve the room. And when I noticed a serious problem, Evan lowered his voice. You should have reported it through proper channels. Amara looked toward Olivia, then at the altered file still projected behind Damon. I did. Evan's eyes flickered away. That small movement hurt more than his words. He knew. Everyone close enough to hear knew. Yet he had chosen the side that could affect the hotel's contracts. Damon stepped nearer. A person in your position does not walk into a financial presentation and understand more than an experienced team without help. Amara studied him. There it was. Not spoken with a forbidden word. Not delivered as an open declaration, but complete in its meaning. Which position? She asked. Damon's expression hardened. You know what I mean. Do I? Do you mean a server? Someone without a completed degree? Or the only black woman in this room whose knowledge you have treated as suspicious from the moment she spoke? The silence that followed was different from the others. It did not belong to surprise. It belonged to recognition. Damon opened his mouth, then stopped. He had spent hours circling the idea without naming it. Amara had placed it in the center of the room where no one could pretend not to see it. Still, no one moved. Investors watched their screens. Executives adjusted their cuffs. Reporters held phones steady. They had enough information to understand what was happening and enough self-interest to hesitate. Amara felt the loneliness of standing before people who knew the truth, but were waiting to see whether defending it would cost them anything. Then Olivia closed the demonstration file and opened her email. There was a warning, she said. Damon turned. Do not do this. Her hands trembled, but she continued. She searched for a message sent 6 weeks earlier. The subject line appeared on the main screen. Meridian Fairness. Depument Risk. Olivia opened it. The report described geographic bias, inconsistent recovery labeling, overstated accuracy, and the need for independent testing before investor release. It had been sent to Caleb, the compliance office, and Damon's executive administration address. No one had answered. I submitted this after the validation run, Olivia said. I was told the concerns were outside the launch scope. Damon's voice became quiet. You are violating internal policy. The policy did not correct the model. This could end your career. Olivia looked at Amara. Silence was already changing what kind of career I had. The sentence unsettled Caleb. He stood slowly, straightening his jacket with hands that no longer looked steady. Damon watched him with warning in his eyes. Caleb, the CFO, faced the audience rather than his employer. The report was received, he said. The data team recommended delaying the launch. Damon's face emptied of expression. Caleb swallowed. We knew the model was not ready. The words did not arrive loudly. They did not need to. Amara had been accused of stealing the truth. Now the truth was being delivered by the people who had helped hide it. Caleb's admission should have ended the argument. It did not. Damon stood beneath the projected email with the posture of a man refusing to recognize the shape of defeat. An internal recommendation to delay is not proof that Miss Cole independently understood the model, he said. It proves concerns existed. It does not prove where she learned them. Amara felt exhaustion settle behind her eyes. The clock for the original challenge showed less than 16 minutes, though the room had moved far beyond the test Damon intended. Then do not take my word for it, she said. Give me something I could not have seen before today. Helen studied her. You are requesting an independent assessment? A new data set. A different model. Something unrelated to Whitaker Strategic. Damon gave a humorless smile. You believe one more performance will erase the questions? No, I believe a reproducible process will answer them. Helen considered the request, then opened her laptop. She had brought materials from a research project at Lakefront University involving credit access and operational risk. The results had not been presented publicly, and the files had never passed through Whitaker's strategic. I have a validation set containing anonymized business records from 3 Midwestern cities, she said. 2 models have nearly identical overall accuracy. One produces substantially uneven error rates across geographic groups. The task is to identify the source and propose a correction without making the model commercially useless. Damon folded his arms. How long? Helen looked at Amara. 30 minutes. 20, Damon said. Helen ignored him. 25. Amara nodded. A clean computer was placed on the table. Helen transferred the files directly from an encrypted drive while Marcus watched. Olivia remained several feet away. No one could reasonably claim she was guiding the process. The new timer began. Amara opened the documentation and did what she had done before. She resisted the temptation to chase complexity. First, she compared group-level performance rather than the single accuracy score displayed in the summary. Both models were approximately 80% accurate overall. That number concealed the problem. One model misclassified applicants from the smallest geographic group at more than twice the rate of the largest group. Average accuracy is hiding concentrated error, she said. Helen nodded without confirming whether the conclusion was correct. Amara examined the feature contributions. Income, cash reserves, debt service, customer concentration, distance to a bank branch, and local commercial activity all influenced the result. The distance variable appeared harmless. It measured convenience and access, yet its weight increased sharply in districts with fewer banking locations. Distance is acting as a proxy, Amara said. Damon interrupted. For what? For conditions the model does not measure directly. She compared distance with property values, lending density, and historical approval rates. The relationships overlapped. Communities with fewer bank branches had also received less lending over time. The model interpreted limited access as evidence that applicants were less reliable. It is punishing people for being farther from services they did not choose to lose, she said. 17 minutes remained. Removing the variable entirely reduced the disparity but also lowered predictive performance. Amara did not celebrate. A fairer model that became too inaccurate could still fail the people it was meant to serve. She searched for direct measures that captured the legitimate concern behind the proxy: cash flow consistency, payment behavior, operating reserves, and verified customer demand. She rebuilt the feature set around those indicators, then recalibrated the threshold separately from the training process. The overall accuracy recovered. The error gap narrowed sharply. Expected losses stayed within the acceptable range. Helen moved closer to the screen. Run it again with the holdout sample. Amara did. The result held. 9 minutes remained. What did she change? Jonathan asked. Helen answered this time. She removed a geographic shortcut and replaced it with direct evidence of business capacity. Damon looked at the output but said nothing. Amara documented each step, then returned to Meridian while the independent test remained on the screen. The original challenge clock showed 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Using the restored recovery field and corrected definitions, she re-ran the classifications, grouped the errors, and calculated the financial impact. Meridian's claimed accuracy fell from 92% to approximately 76% under consistent validation. More than 100 businesses changed risk category. The errors were not random. They were concentrated in neighborhoods with large black populations and long histories of restricted credit. At the same time, several supposedly safe investments showed higher risk than the presentation had disclosed. 58 seconds remained when Amara saved the final audit table. She placed the marker down. Helen reviewed the calculations, checked the scripts, and compared the corrected outputs. No one spoke while she worked. At last, she faced the room. The findings are reproducible, she said. Mrs. Cole identified material errors in the Whitaker model and completed an independent assessment using data she had never seen. Her method is technically sound. Damon's challenge had been designed to force Amara to prove she belonged in the room. Instead, it had forced the room to explain why it had assumed she did not. Marcus lifted the signed agreement from the table and placed it in front of Damon. "The condition has been met," he said. $4 million. Damon did not touch the agreement. He looked at it as though the signature at the bottom belonged to someone he no longer recognized. "Meridian is a developing system," he said at last. "No serious model is perfect during testing." Helen closed her laptop. "You presented it as ready for investment decisions. The issues can be corrected." "They should have been corrected before $6 billion was attached to them," Jonathan said. Damon's gaze moved across the audience, searching for the instinctive support he had received at the beginning. It was gone. Some investors looked angry. Others looked calculating. A few appeared embarrassed by how quickly they had laughed at Amara. Damon turned back to her. "You have framed technical limitations as racial discrimination." Amara felt the fatigue in her shoulders, but her voice remained steady. "I showed where the errors were concentrated. The model does not use race. A system does not need to ask someone's race if it uses the conditions created around race as substitutes. There was no discriminatory intent. Impact does not disappear because no one wants to name it." The sentence reached farther than accusation. It included Olivia's ignored report, Caleb's silence, Evan's assignments, the investors who had watched, and the model itself. Damon began to respond, but Jonathan was already speaking with two other fund representatives. Within minutes, the conversation shifted from whether Meridian had failed to what would happen next. The investors did not dramatically withdraw every dollar. They did something more dangerous to Damon's control. They imposed conditions. Deployment would be suspended. An independent audit would examine the full model. Accuracy would be reported by subgroup instead of as one polished average. A community advisory panel would review the variables affecting underserved areas. No funding decision could rely on Meridian until the board received a corrected validation report. Caleb agreed to preserve all internal records. Olivia would be protected from retaliation while cooperating with the audit. Damon listened as authority moved around him without asking permission. Near the side aisle, a banquet employee approached the hotel's regional director and showed her a recording from a staff meeting. Evan's voice could be heard explaining that only employees who matched the client's preferred image should be placed in visible positions. The phrase was vague enough to avoid confession and clear enough to reveal practice. The director asked Evan to step away from the event. He looked toward Amara with resentment, as if her refusal to remain invisible had caused his words to exist. He was placed on administrative suspension pending review. The hotel announced that it would examine assignment practices, establish an independent reporting channel, and prohibit retaliation against employees who raised concerns in good faith. None of it repaired the years that had already passed, but consequence had finally entered rooms where explanation had once been enough. Marcus returned to the agreement. "Mr. Whitaker, the payment process should begin tonight." Damon signed the transfer authorization with slow, controlled movements. $2 million would be paid to Amara. $2 million would establish the scholarship fund described in the contract. He set down the pen. "I underestimated you," he said. The sentence sounded rehearsed, even though it had not existed an hour earlier. Amara looked at him. "You did more than underestimate me." Damon's eyes narrowed. "What would you call it?" "You decided I could not be right before you heard my reasoning. Then every time the evidence supported me, you searched for another explanation that preserved your opinion of me." He said nothing. "You treated my knowledge as suspicious because it came from someone you had already placed beneath you." For the first time, Damon's silence did not feel strategic. It felt exposed. After a moment, he offered her a position on Whitaker Strategic's model review team. The proposal was generous in salary and carefully worded for the people listening. Amara declined. "You have not built an independent review team," she said. "You are offering me a title before changing the structure that ignored Olivia." Damon's expression cooled again. "What do you want?" "An audit that reports outside your office. Protection for everyone who participates. Public correction of the 92% claim." representation from the communities affected by the model, and publication of the standards used to measure fairness. Those are board decisions. Then the board should make them. She agreed to provide her documented findings to the independent auditors, but only under those conditions. She would not become a symbol used to suggest the problem had been solved. Damon left Northbridge Hall through the same side entrance he had used to enter, but no one stood to greet him. No applause followed. Amara remained near the whiteboards, still wearing the white shirt and black trousers of the hotel staff. Her folded service jacket rested on the chair behind her. At the beginning of the afternoon, the room had seen the uniform and decided what she was allowed to know. Now more than 100 people waited while she explained what the corrected model should measure. She had not changed clothes. The room had changed its eyes. 6 months later, Amara sat in the second row of a classroom at Lakefront University with the same yellow legal pad she had used at her kitchen table. The cover was bent. Several pages had been reinforced with clear tape. She could have replaced it. She had replaced the old laptop, paid Maya's remaining tuition balance, and moved into an apartment where the radiator no longer sounded like loose machinery. But the legal pad stayed. It reminded her that knowledge had existed before anyone important agreed to recognize it. Returning to school was less cinematic than people imagined. There were transfer forms, placement exams, lost transcripts, and long meetings about which credits still counted. Amara did not enter as a professor or a celebrated genius. She returned as a student, completing the degree she had once left unfinished. Lakefront accepted much of her previous coursework, and Helen arranged a paid research position in the university's Center for Responsible Data Systems. Amara divided her time between classes and audits of models used in lending, employment, and public investment. The work demanded patience. Most harmful systems did not contain one dramatic error waiting to be uncovered. They contained dozens of reasonable-looking choices whose consequences became visible only when someone asked who carried the mistakes. Maya completed her clinical training and began working at a community health center. On difficult mornings, she still called Amara before sunrise. Their conversations were no longer dominated by tuition deadlines, though neither of them had entirely learned how to trust financial calm. The Second Chance Schools Fund opened its first application cycle with $2 million. Amara insisted that applicants not be judged only by uninterrupted academic records. The fund considered caregiving responsibilities, employment history, financial disruption, and the determination required to return after years away. Its first recipients included workers, former caregivers, and adults who had spent years believing the door to education had closed permanently. Whitaker's critique changed more slowly. Meridian remained suspended for several months while outside auditors rebuilt its validation process. Zip code was removed as a direct decision factor. Property value was sharply reduced. Historical lending volume could no longer be used without adjustment for unequal access. Recovery after temporary disruption became a measured outcome rather than an exception erased from the data. The company began publishing error rates across geographic groups instead of presenting one average number. Several businesses previously rejected by Meridian were reviewed again. Some still failed to qualify. Others received financing after direct measures showed stable revenue, manageable debt, and strong customer demand. The purpose was not to approve everyone. It was to ensure that equal evidence received equal consideration. Olivia joined the independent audit office created outside Damon's reporting line. She was not celebrated inside the company. Some colleagues treated her as disloyal. Others quietly thanked her for saying what they had been afraid to say. Caleb resigned from his position and cooperated with the board investigation. He later admitted publicly that he had confused professional caution with ethical neutrality. Damon remained chairman, but lost direct authority over Meridian and several investment committees. He issued a formal statement acknowledging that the company had overstated the model's readiness. The apology was careful and incomplete. Amara did not expect transformation simply because embarrassment had become expensive. Accountability, she learned, was rarely a single moment. It was a structure built after the moment when attention had moved elsewhere. The video from Northbridge Hall circulated widely for several weeks. Strangers called Amara brave, brilliant, disruptive, inspiring, and dangerous, often without understanding the work she had done. Interviews focused on the confrontation because conflict was easier to package than methodology. Amara accepted only a few. She used them to explain that numbers did not become neutral merely because they were produced by software. Then she returned to class. On the first day of a seminar on algorithmic decision-making, a student seated beside her recognized her. "You're the woman who defeated that billionaire," he said. Amara opened her notebook. "I did not defeat him. It looked that way. I checked a model everyone had been told not to question." Helen entered and wrote a sentence across the board. "A model is not neutral merely because it uses numbers." The room quieted. Amara looked at the words and thought of Northbridge Hall, of the laughter that had begun before anyone checked her calculation, of Olivia's shaking hands, Caleb's delayed confession, and the neighborhood shaded red on a screen by people who rarely entered them. Being seen had changed her life, but visibility was not justice. Respect was not applause after a public victory. Respect was listening before humiliation became necessary. It was testing assumptions before they became policy. It was recognizing that a uniform could reveal where someone worked without revealing the limits of what they knew. Amara uncapped her pen. Years earlier, she had studied alone because the world had given her no formal place to continue. Now she was back in a classroom, not because a billionaire had granted her value, but because she had refused to let his judgment define it. Numbers had opened the door, but dignity was the reason she walked through. And this time, when Amara began to speak, no one laughed before checking whether she was right.